So again, thank you to CAA for sponsoring us for the wrap on the trip. So the agenda for today, so one of the things you'll find today is I'll be talking a lot. So if you're interested in doing presentations in the future, I would certainly encourage you guys to speak up and let us know. We'd be happy to have other people also contribute to presentations. So we're going to start talking about the IPCC report that was just released a few months back. We were supposed to talk about that last month, but we pushed it to this month because we had too much material. So we'll talk about that relatively briefly. Then we'll talk about a conference I went to in Montreal called Impulsion. And anyways, when we get to the, you'll see that it was a pretty interesting conference, and it might be worthwhile for other people in future years to also go see the conference in question. Then we're going to talk about the new EPA emissions regulations. You may have heard that when was it, around the 12th, I believe, of April. Hey, it's going. Thanks. So around the 12th of April, we had the EPA release new draft regulations for emissions. Okay, so they're using a scheme similar to what Europe has done. So the EU has done to reduce the number of the amount of emissions from vehicles, and that is pushing sales of EVs to new heights in Europe, and we're expecting the same thing to happen in the US. So we'll get to that when we get there. We'll give you more details. Then Mike will talk about the recent news. Lots of news happening lately. It seems that every week there's a new EV being announced or launched. So lots of stuff out there. Then we'll talk about like usual past and future events, and then go to the table. Okay, so it should be hopefully we should have a fun little meeting. How come this is the? How come that is right there? Okay, so I guess we're going to talk about the Impulsion conference first.
You made a slideshow.
Yeah, I guess I put the slides in the wrong order. I've been really busy in the last couple of weeks with the events. When we talk about past events, you'll see we've had a number of events, and I'm also working on organizing the show for October, which is also taking much of my time. So, anyways, so the Impulsion conference in Quebec. Just briefly, I want to talk about what was happening there. So it was hosted by Impulsion Quebec, which is an organization that's been around for, I'm guessing, around 12 to 15 years. And their mission is to accelerate the electrification of the transportation system. So sounds a bit like what we're trying to do, right? Although they're a very large organization with lots of money and all that, so they're able to do things like big conferences. So this conference, like it says there were about 1,300 participants. And lots of, it was 3 days, well, 2.5 days plus 1.5 day of visits, field visits, which I'll talk about when we get to that slide. So very interesting topics. One thing that was very interesting is who you see on the left there. So this was unannounced, but it turns out that the Prime Minister showed up and gave a speech at the opening of the conference. Why does this matter? Regardless of what your political leanings are, this matters because it's an indication that the current federal government is how should I put it, is understands that the future is electric and is working to promote the electrification of the transportation system. And actually, on that day when they opened the conference, that's the day when they announced the Volkswagen battery plant in St. Thomas. So one of the other guys there beside him, the shorter one beside the Trudeau, that's Minister Champagne. He's a dynamo, that guy. He just like he's a bundle of energy. Really interesting guy to hear speak. But he's the one who's been spearheading the effort to get Canada to take advantage of the opportunities that there are with the electrification of the transportation system, right? So everything from minerals, critical minerals, mining, to processing them, making batteries, building cars and all that. They're working on trying to get as much of that into Canada as possible, which is great news. The other thing that I saw is there were things like on the right-hand side, and I don't know if Mitchell's on yet, but So this is a street sweeper that's entirely electric. So for those of you who experience a street sweeper, that usually goes at night and, you know, you have the windows open and the thing wakes you up, right? This one is considerably more quiet, so it's been purchased by the Pac Jean Drapeau, I believe, and they're putting it into service, should be in service now, so very interesting device that we could potentially have in Ottawa. So here, just showing you some of the slides without getting into lots of details about the presentations. I'm not going to go over much of the content there, but here is a presentation that has a real cost of charging an EV in by province, right? And the one at the bottom, ironically enough, is PEI. I didn't think PEI had the highest electricity rates, but they do. Quebec obviously is the top one there. So this slide talks about market share based on whether there's an incentive or not in the province in question. Incentive and incentive mandate. So you see the first one there. They compare it to California, which is, I believe, 20% or so, 19% market share in 2022, and BC is close to that, 18% in 2022, and Quebec is what again, 13%. So, and those are the jurisdictions in this list where there's a set mandate and there's also incentives for purchasing electric vehicles, right? So the point you're trying to make, obviously, is that we need incentives. So this slide is, this is a proponent of hydrogen that was talking about how hydrogen was a solution for those. So if you look on the left-hand side for the heavy duty part of stuff, and electric would be mostly for what's in blue there. So although they're saying that some of the stuff in blue could also be hydrogen, but anyways, so there's still people in conferences like that promoting hydrogen for all sorts of uses that, as we discussed before, we don't think, I don't think anyways, are part of the future. So, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about with that conference is there was a half-day field trip that was part of the conference, and you had different things you could choose, and I chose this one. And I actually was a bit disappointed that I got this one. I was hoping to get Electric and other places where they were building stuff, because I like to visit plants where they're building stuff. Anyways, we went to the Institute as Véhiculing event, which I had heard about before. They used to do, I think it was really Clit. It was the no, Branchez-vous, were events that we're doing across the province of Quebec to do test drives. And now EVCO is doing that mostly, so they're not doing so much. But so if you look on the left-hand side, that's a new building that we were in when we went there. On the right-hand side, what's interesting here, that's their employee parking. Every spot except for one or two has a charger, and most of those spots are filled by charging by electric cars. Okay, so they're eating their own dog food, as we used to say at Microsoft. So other things that we're doing, so we did a visit of the whole facility, and this particular van you see here, that's a e-transit van that was converted to provide charging on a mobile basis. Okay, so this is not for roadside assistance. This is for situations where in Montreal, it's very common, you park on the street, you don't park, you don't have an assigned parking spot, and this is a service that would come over every few days and charge up your car and for a particular fee. This is what they're trying to do, okay? So I don't know if it's a business model that actually will work. You could see at the bottom left-hand side there, you see the back and what it looks like inside. They have that one is a 50 kilowatt charging station with a big battery in there to provide power to charge the vehicle. And you see on the left-hand side of that picture, there's a F-150 Lightning that they were using to do some testing of the device. So the Institute of Véhiculing event, what their mission is to help industry to develop solutions that have to do with newer vehicles, essentially electrification of vehicles, right? So they've done a whole bunch of different projects, somewhere like 500 different projects, and we saw a few others. So this one here is a mining truck. It's a Alain probably knows this. It's a model year 2006 heavy duty truck from a mine. So it's actually bigger than a regular dump truck by some amount. It looks massive when you're beside it. And you can see with the guy standing beside it there is quite big. So the guy is standing, bottom left-hand corner, he's standing in front of one of the battery units. There's a second one to the left. And there's two others on the other side. And if you look at the top left corner, that's the front. So they open the trunk in front. And there's another battery in there. The motor actually is a small thing that you see if you look at the other picture at the lower right-hand corner. So the motor is very, very small, but they have this big honking battery in there, plus the other 4 batteries on the vehicle. So this is a conversion they've done for mining that's looking to decarbonize their production. So other things they're doing, so where you see the Tesla Model 3 there, I think it's the Model 3 anyways, they have a dynamometer. So what they could do is do some studies of how much real power you get to the wheel and all that. So they're able to confirm some of the design specs of various vehicles. So they're actually looking at installing one of these, but a bigger version of it for commercial trucks that will be able to attach to the hubs of the trucks, the back wheels of the trucks. So they'll be able to do some testing of those trucks there. The picture in the middle, that's a wiring harness. You guys have probably seen at least pictures of wiring harnesses for vehicles, right? So what they do is they'll do, it's on printed paper. So they've got a plan made, they've got printed paper and they put on the table. And they lay out the wires as per the plan on the table, right? So that's done for custom projects. So wiring harness like that takes about two weeks to build manually. When you're doing it commercially for commercial vehicles for production, you have to be able to do it much faster, right? But this is for unique one-off projects. So they do that type of thing. On the right-hand side, it's a project that's with the Ministère des Transports du Québec, and what they have is hard to see in the picture there, but on top of here, somewhere, here, there are cameras that fit in front of the mirror in a pickup truck, okay? And the windshield on top of the mirror or on the bottom, I'm not sure exactly, but in the windshield. And the camera is used to detect potholes. And they use artificial intelligence to detect them and to characterize them so that they'll do maintenance of the roads. And for those who've driven on Quebec roads, although you don't need a camera, yeah. Although the roads in Ottawa sometimes are pretty bad too. But anyways, so they're doing that to detect potholes and fix them, hopefully. The other thing they're doing is they're detecting lights that are burnt. So lamp posts, lights that don't work, they're detecting it and they're inventorying them so that they can have people go out and there's someone is I'll ignore them. Someone's texting me. So so the idea is to use artificial intelligence to make that maintenance type of task a bit easier, right? So and the other thing that's interesting about their facility, it's a new facility, like I said earlier, and they're using mass timber in much of the building. So instead of using steel and concrete, so for those of you who haven't seen the presentations we had before about mass timber, when you do mass timber, what you're doing is you're taking the carbon that's in the wood and you're sequestering it in the structure of the building, right? So you're taking carbon that the plants took from the air and you're keeping it in the building. If you're using steel or concrete, if you're using steel or concrete, what you're doing there is steel production actually emits lots of greenhouse gases. Same with concrete production. The cement portion of concrete, the production of that emits a lot of CO2. So by using wood, you're actually, instead of emitting CO2 to greenhouse gases to produce the materials, you're actually sequestering CO2. So it's thought to be a better, environmentally more sustainable thing to do. Okay. Any questions at this point? So that's what I have on. Yes.
One point I think to be thinking about with that battery, I think one of the places where it might be very useful is in the construction industry. We've been working a lot this last month in the construction industry, and people, you have a lot of like, construction equipment that gets floated from place to place. There's no home, but that van to, come up to the construction site,
That could be one case, yeah.
plug in the breaker machine or the whatever, the hoe or whatever, and charge it for a few hours.
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that use case, but that is a good point. Now, I did say that the van there had a 50 kilowatt charger, right? So 50 kilowatt charger is relatively slow for what we have these days, right?
Yeah,
Their next version is gonna have 125 or 150 kilowatts, so much faster.
right.
So that will reduce the amount of time required for the charge up, right?
And how much battery can they fit in a back of a van like that?
They didn't say, So obviously the weight is a real issue, right? And they're not using the battery that comes with the fact that it's an E-transit. They're not able to tap into that battery.
Right,
So what they have to do is have to have a separate battery that's used just to recharge.
right.
So it's probably a warranty issue maybe with Ford if you're tapping into the battery for other things, right? I don't know.
That's probably about 100 kilowatts, right?
The battery of the truck itself?
Well, no, what they can carry. It's
Probably
probably around that range, right? Because it's built
Probably
to
around
belt.
that range, yeah, because, yeah.
That would max out the truck, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you need to be able to carry it plus the charger itself.
That's respectable, 100 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, so for a lot of use cases, I think it could make sense. Now, whether this is a viable business model, I'm not sure.
No.
But they're giving it a try and we'll see what they can do, right? So you guys are probably remember my talking about CA Quebec and what they've been doing for roadside charging. So they have this trailer that will, with batteries that they use to do roadside charging for emergencies, but what they're finding is it's not terribly practical.
No.
Because they don't have enough of these for one thing, and it's just as easy and much faster.
To just totally
The only thing to a charger, which
Yeah.
it'll be a faster charger probably anyways, so might as well do that instead, right? So, okay. Any other comments, questions on that? No? Okay, so it was a fun conference, it really was. So, next topic. So, the FECC, as most of you realize, they released their 6th assessment report. This is the last report until 2030. And it was released in February, I believe, February 11th, around that time. And essentially, as it says here, it's a summary of the previous reports, but it does give us some guidance on what we should be doing and what we should stop doing over the next few years if we want to avoid the worst aspects of climate change, right? So one of the conclusions is the planet has already warmed on average by 1.1 degrees Celsius, and most of you probably know that during the close to the equator, that's a bit less, but in the poles, it's much more, right? So the north has experienced about 3 times the heating here. In Ottawa, we've experienced about twice this heating, okay? And because we're closer to the poles, right? So anyways, the negative impacts affect those that contributed the least. So if you look at some of the islands in the Pacific that are being, they're being eliminated because of the water rising and all this and storms that are stronger and all that, right? There's poor people that are being displaced. And obviously people who have less means have less resources to be able to move if there's water that's like in Bangladesh that's invading the big deltas there and all that. So that's a very unfortunate thing that we should keep in mind, right? Sometimes it's easy for us to forget that other people elsewhere have it's as if they don't exist because we don't see them on the news, right? Adaptation strategies have been uneven, and again, that depends on some adaptation strategies have been not necessarily effective, right? And uneven, that also depends on who has money to do what, right? So certain parts of the world haven't been able to do any adaptation. So adaptation is, like the word says, adapting to the new reality of stronger storms and that kind of stuff. Whereas mitigation is doing stuff to try to keep it from getting worse, right? So, I'm more interested in mitigation because I'm interested in doing things that will reduce the amount of greenhouse gases, so the planet stops warming. And we could go back to maybe having less of these crazy storms. So in terms of mitigation, what they're concluding is that renewables are cheaper than ever, so no big surprise for us. They continue to increase, we continue to increase emissions, so emissions are still increasing. We had a bit of a drop because of the pandemic. But in 2022, we're back to our bad habits of increasing emissions. Everything is worse and harder the warmer it gets. What that means is the more time we have to adjust. It's a bit like the Titanic going towards the iceberg. If they had just did a 1 degree change, 15 miles away from the iceberg, they probably would have never hit it. But as they got closer and closer, they couldn't avoid it, right? So same thing here. The more we emit greenhouse gases, the harder it gets, and the bigger the measures we need to take to counteract the global warming, right? There's a rapidly closing window of opportunity to avoid the 5 degrees, so that's same related to that last point, right? So there are less and less opportunities for us to find ways to actually close that gap. And this might got bored from your news presentation from last time.
Yep.
I did change the right-hand side because I was looking for a graph that was a bit easier to explain, but bottom line is the graph on the left-hand side in that picture there shows different parts of the world and how much cumulative emissions have been emitted over the since 1850. Okay, and you can see that North America is the worst of the bunch and all that, right? So without getting into all the details, this is stuff that we've discussed before, and we know, right? The one on the right-hand side is a per capita illustration of a similar phenomenon, right? So, and you all know, I assume, if you've listened to previous presentations, that North America is number one in per capita and overall lifetime emissions, right? So cumulative emissions. So we are looking pretty bad, and we need to change our ways big time if we want to avoid more catastrophic weather. So here, what's needed to limit the Earth warming to just 1.5 degrees Celsius? Well, global emissions have to peak before 2025. Okay, just a few years from now, 2 years from now. And these are the numbers that we have to cut back by. And again, without going into the details, this is not new stuff for all of us, right? So what I term the good news, okay? The good news is that we are seeing evidence that climate policy is working, okay? So we see evidence that several billion tons a year are being avoided by policies that have been implemented. And this is determined by looking at what the emissions would have been without these policies and what they are now, right? So various different policies across the world. So climate policy is making a difference, right? There's lots of solutions, and again, we talked about this over and over again in previous meetings. They're available, cheap and popular. It's mostly solar, wind, and batteries to store the wind, store the energy when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, right? And the economics are on the side of action. So solar and wind, again, getting very inexpensive, and they're the cheapest source of energy anywhere on the planet at this point. So the other thing that I added that did come that I didn't see directly in some coverage of the IPCC report is that I know for a fact, I've seen numbers on this, that GDP growth has now been decoupled from GHG emissions. So it used to be the GDP growth and GHG emissions for countries were essentially tracking together, right? So what we're seeing in countries like Canada, we haven't reduced emissions much yet, but our GDP has continued to increase, right? So the intensity of GHG emissions had actually lowered, which is a good trend for the future, right? So and actually there's some evidence that the growth of emissions is slowing and will likely peak sometime around 2025, like what the previous slide said that we needed to do. So there's some good news there. Things that are missing from the IPCC report. So one of the things you need to know about the IPCC report is that it's essentially a document that was written by a committee, and every country that's participated in this, and there's something like 191, I think, that have signed off on this. Every one of those countries has to sign off on it. So in particular, the need to completely phase out fossil fuels was watered down to the need to reduce fossil fuels. Okay, and that was at the request of, I think it's Qatar, that asked for that to be changed, if I remember correctly. And the discussion of animal agriculture was removed also. That's a very taboo subject in a lot of areas, and you can see, if you've looked at social media lately and ads, you could see that the farmers unions and all that, they're starting to run ads saying things like every farmer is an environmentalist and things like that, to position the farming industry against a coming backlash, if you will, on the farming industry that actually is producing quite a bit of greenhouse gases, right? So anyways, there's no mention of that in the report, no mention of eliminating milk and milk products, because they also contribute lots of emissions, right? And as I say, they're all countries that have been put on the final report, right? So that being said, if you think about that, okay, all the countries in the world, oil producing countries, have an input on this, and the report is saying some things that look pretty freaking dire, okay? So you can imagine that the real situation is somewhat worse than that, because it's been watered down in this report. Okay, so we have no friggin' time to waste. We need to get on with the program and do what we can to reduce greenhouse gases, right? So, any questions, comments? Any I missed? I feel like it's my Raymond's monologue today.
Yep.
Pretty much. Pretty much. You get to do the news, so you get to talk about
I
that.
get to talk a little bit.
No questions online? Comments online?
Put up your hand and we can unmute you or
Yeah,
whatever.
if you guys could, someone.
I'm on it. No shit.
Great. Okay, so next topic is the new EPA regulations. And first I want to talk about, start with a bit of background to set the context of what we have right now in the US. So the current EPA rules that were, they run out in 2026. So the way the EPA does it is they set rules for a period of time. And the last rules that were set for emissions were set up to the year 2026. So you may have remembered that during the Trump years, there was some to and fro, and they watered down the rules and they brought them back to be more stringent, right? But essentially, those rules are all applying until 2026. And if you look at the way the rules are set up, they're set up so that we get about, in the US, 8% market share of EVs. Okay, well, the US is almost there already. I think I have it already on the next
Still the
slide.
news.
I have it in the next slide too, I think, but anyways, but yeah, you do have it in the news. So there was an executive order for Biden in August 2021. And the idea with that executive order, I'm not sure how they were supposed to be doing it, but the order said that they had to find ways to get to 50% of new light duty vehicles, in this case, to be zero emission by 2030. Okay, so 50% is starting to be a fairly meeting as part of the market, right? Half the market. So if you look at what other countries have done, the countries that have said that there will have to be at 100% zero emission vehicles by a certain date are the ones listed there. So Norway is 2025, and those of you who've been following stuff, you know that Norway is already almost there. So if you look at the next group of countries, so Austria, Netherlands, Denmark, Iceland, India, Ireland, India. Oh, I didn't notice that. That's cool. Anyways, they're going to be banning the sale of anything that emits greenhouse gases by 2030. So that's only 7 years from now. That's not very far. Okay. And then there's other countries like Canada that have said that they would eliminate or ban the sale by 2035. Again, this is light duty vehicles. And other countries like France, Spain, and Sri Lanka, it's 2040. So that's a different way of doing it, right? So in the case of the US, they're using emissions, they're using emissions study forced towards EVs. That's the same thing as the EU has done, by the way, right? The EU itself has done, has made much more stringent, yes, question?
So, here's another thing you can think about this, although India.
Mhm.
Actually buys very little new vehicles compared to the rest of the world. Japan emptied itself in India,
Okay,
so
yeah,
if Japan doesn't fix this problem,
yeah,
India won't.
yeah. Yeah. It's surprising to me that India is there for such a short-term thing. China actually has been strongly encouraging the adoption of EVs, but they haven't set dates by which they want to start eliminating the old stuff, right? So anyways, some of these will extend to light duty vehicles and heavy duty vehicles in some cases. So Canada, it's saying that heavy duty vehicles will be all electric or zero emission by 2040. So that's the background and under which this was done, right? So the EV regulations, like I said, it's only 758 pages. I read a bunch of it, but I didn't read the whole thing. This is dry, like if you want to sleep. I got a suggestion for you. So the overall goal is cleaner cars, cleaner air as quickly as possible. Pretty straightforward. I like goals like that are very clear and clean and straightforward. Pun intended there. But anyways, it applies to cars and light duty trucks. Okay, there is also provisions for medium and heavy duty vehicles. And the years covered are 2027 to 2032. So remember I said the existing rules go to 2026 and then this starts in 2027, goes to 2032. So the EV market rose from 5.8% in 2022 to 2.2% in early 2023, according to the EPA. Okay, this comes from the EPA. So we're seeing a large increase in EV market share in the US, just like we are in Canada, right? So there's 280 million light duty no, it says vehicles, it doesn't say light duty, they say vehicles in the US. That's a lot of vehicles, spewing out lots of greenhouse gases, right? So what the standard does is they're thinking that it's going to essentially result in about 2/3 of the light duty fleet to be EVs by 2032. Okay. So similar to, if you look at, remember the presidential order is 50% by 2030. This is 67% by 2032, sort of implements in some ways what the executive order was saying to do, right? So for medium and duty vehicles, you're talking about 46% by 2032. And
Can I ask a quick question about these like numbers? Is that a per manufacturer? Like, does that mean that
no,
every manufacturer has to do 67%? Or is this a thing where Tesla will sell their shares to, their credits to General Motors or Mazda?
so right now, I didn't get into the penalties part of it. I did see it in the executive summary of it,
Right.
but I have to say the executive summary was short of a summary. It was a summary of 758 pages, so it wasn't short. Okay, so I don't know what the penalties are, but this would apply to the fleet wide, but also to individual manufacturers, right? So there would be automatic credits going from one manufacturer to the other. There may be an ability to sell them. I don't know. I'm not sure what the provisions are. Also, these are proposed standards. You'll see in the next slide that they're proposing different options to get to these numbers. And so they're asking for public consultation on how to do that. But there must be some numbers, penalty mechanisms in there. I just don't.
Sure, read more than 758 pages.
Yeah, I should have.
Probably in there.
Yeah.
But no,
But you know, I was doing this at 1 o'clock in the morning last night, so I didn't get that far.
no, the question becomes, getting back to what I was saying about the other, the Canadian ones is, are we, if every manufacturer is doing somewhere around 67% and Tesla's doing 100 and,
So we're further ahead, absolutely.
you know,
Yes,
we're
yes,
much further ahead, you know,
yes.
and by these dates, you're also gonna be looking at FinFast and probably
Yes.
BYD and that's some of these others coming in as well.
Yes, so, you know, we'll see, and these are, I mean, these are, when you're trying to project many years in the future, you know, the further in the future you project, you know this from statistical point of view, right? The more there's uncertainty in the the accuracy of the projections, right? So,
Obviously.
so we'll see how that turns out, but the intent is to get to those numbers by that time, right? So the intent actually is to reduce the emissions, not generate sales of EVs directly, okay? Slightly different. So manufacturers would be able to choose to reduce emissions by doing things like producing cleaner cars, right? And doing things like that instead, okay?
Big question again is, will the manufacturers doing the PT Cruiser bullshit again, right? Which PT Cruiser was considered a pickup truck to lower the fleet of the pickup truck.
I think light duty vehicles includes pickups now.
It does, but
Back into this.
yeah, but regardless of the specifics of that case, I would be very surprised if manufacturers didn't find creative ways to try to get around some of these things. You know, I really wouldn't be surprised, right? So, actually, the last point there is up to 35% of new short haul heavy duty trucks. So this is Class 8 type trucks. But short haul, 35% of them would be electrified by 2032, and 25% of the long haul trucks. Okay. So this includes every size of vehicle out there. So a road vehicle, anyways, not trains and other stuff. So if you look at, and I'm going to get closer to the numbers because they're too small for you, and actually you guys probably can't see them too well in the room here. But if you look at the GT impacts, right, they have, so the proposed standard is the first column that you see after the years. And the three alternatives are alternatives that are being proposed. And if you look at them, they result in different reductions overall, but some of them do it much faster. So you see the second alternative one there, in 2027, we're down to 124 instead of 134 in the proposed standard. Okay, so they're asking for input from manufacturers and the public to see which of these they should implement. And this particular one, table 8, that's for cars, right? If you look at table 9, it's trucks, and it's a similar issue where they're trying to figure out what would be the most viable of these options. Now, there could be some cases where because of a certain technology changing or whatever it may be, there may be reasons why we should be doing alternative 1 instead of alternative 3, right? It all depends on what the feedback will be, what they basically decide. So if we look at, so that was greenhouse gases before. Here, there are some greenhouse gases here, but it's other pollutants also. So here, the table 13 is, it's pollutants other than CO2, okay? So if you look at the numbers there, got numbers for CO2, for methane, and for nitrous oxide, right? And those are all greenhouse gases, right? And if you look at table 15, now they're looking at the pollutants that affect people's health, right? So particulate matter below 2.5 micrometer, I think it is, micrometer.
Yeah.
And then nitrous oxides, volatile organic compounds, that's what the VOC is. Sulfur oxides and carbon oxides, so carbon monoxide and other derivatives, right? So they're looking at regulating not only greenhouse gases, but pollutants that we generally associate with health impacts, cancer risk and all that stuff.
That's a fleet average.
Yes.
So you can actually make
Yes.
one electric F-150 and sell a million gas F-150. And you still need regulation.
No.
That's how it's built.
No. The way it's built is if you want to reduce your fleet average by half, let's say, you would have to build 500,000 gas ones and 500,000 electric ones.
With the real. It's
No.
an average of one big.
No, it's average of every vehicle.
They've changed that.
They
They
changed it.
Yeah, that was the news. I don't know, Mike, did you get that in the news this, yeah, that happened this The EPA has come out this, and they're changing how they, you know, they're waking up, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the manufacturers are very creative at finding all sorts of ways around the rules, right? And they read the rules the way they're written. And sometimes the way they're written is not the way that was intended to be enacted, right? And they'll take advantage of all these things. And the previous rules are very, very complex. If you look at the formulas that you need to calculate for your fleet, for compliance of your fleet, the rules are extremely complex. The formulas are all sorts, anyway, very complex, hard to interpret and subject to having errors in them. And actually, there was one at one point where we intervened with EBS because the formula was wrong for something, I can't remember what it was, it's 4 or 5 years ago, and it was actually corrected by it was California that had a mistake, was corrected by them, and then we retrofitted the correction in Canada afterwards. Okay, so any questions about these? Nobody wants to know how this applies to Canada?
Just a comment, Raymond. Everybody will know this, but next year there was an election in the United States, and all this could go out the window like that.
Yeah, we could.
Just people didn't think Trump would be elected in 2016, and yeah, he was.
So that's an important point. So this is the EPA rules. Okay? California has different rules.
Right.
And the rules that California has they count cars.
Yeah.
Okay, so and those rules will continue being applied regardless, just like they were when Trump was in power. And for those who haven't followed the numbers as much as I have, greenhouse gas emissions actually reduced in the US while Trump was in power. Okay, this has to do with the fact that economics are driving us towards cleaner solutions and less carbon intensive solutions. So it's the economics that's making that happen. It's not the tree huggers that are winning the battle. It's just the economics are much better. Okay.
So, know what that is. I'm gonna say BMW, Mercedes or whatever, they'll make a car and an engine for around the world, not just for the US, so. No matter what the US is doing, they're not leaving 100% like this thing. They're a big player,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
not 100%.
But even then, California is a really important market for those manufacturers. And there's not just California, so there's other states that are following California's lead. New York, Washington State, Oregon,
There's a whole bunch.
a few others, a total of 13 in all that have followed their lead over the years. So there's a significant portion of the US market that's subject to rules at the state level and not the federal level. So that's one really good piece of good news. I think personally, these are great rules. They're just gonna maybe accelerate a bit what's inevitable. I know, but I put the hyacinth on the right syllable, okay?
Always.
So,
They will-
and actually to answer the question that I asked about how does this apply to Canada? My understanding is typically when EPA does rules, we follow them. So if the EPA enacts these rules, we're gonna have some corresponding.
Between, Mexico, Canada, the United States, I can't see any other course of action for it.
Well, so in Canada, one of the reasons we do this kind of stuff is that we know the US government has lots more money than we have. Lots more research capability than we have to research why these things should happen and all that. So we, to some degree, accept that they've done a good job and we follow them for a lot of things in the automotive sector. And a big reason for that is that we want the cars built in Canada and the cars shipped from the US to Canada to be the same as what we have in the US, right? Because, yeah, we want the centers to be as close as possible because it's beneficial for us economically, right? Cars are cheaper for us coming from the US and we can send more cars to the
It's
US.
also reasonable, right? I mean, US
Yeah.
is the same.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, that's Wyoming.
That's true, but for the most.
Yeah, so if people don't understand the reference there, Wyoming has said they will ban.
Electric cars by
electric
2030.
cars by
Which would be hilarious, because that means they'll have horses, I guess.
Yeah.
Won't be able to buy any cars.
So the US continues to be the oddball anyway, so there's no other That's what I did, to me, this is great news. It's an approach, the same approach that the EU has used, and it's been very successful in the EU. We've seen market shares, grow very fast in the EU, and we should see the same thing, in North America, right? So Mike, you're next, for the news.
Sweet. I'll give you a break from Raymond now,
How did I get a break?
talking for a while.
I can drink my beer.
All right, this is cool having a remote that works. You're welcome. Thanks, Stan. So Ford is retooling the Oakville plant into what they're gonna call the Oakville EV complex. So this is part of their rejiggering of all their facilities into electric only plants. They've already started construction on the Blue Oval City in the US, which will be supplying the batteries to the Oakville plant. But Oakville will be handling construction of the battery packs and assembly vehicles and stuff for export to the US and consumption in Canada. They haven't announced which cars will be built in Oakville, but they have announced they're spending 1.8 billion, most of which is government money, so public funds, to do this. They will start construction on the conversion of the plant in 2024, so next year, and it'll take around 6 months. So they aim to make 2 million EVs by 2026 as a company. So that's decent. And they keep upping that 2 million. So
Yeah.
every time they release a news release, it's like another million on there. So they're hurrying up to do that. So that's good. Continuing with manufacturing as a theme, Canoe is leasing a facility in Oklahoma. I've resisted the urge to sing it. It's a startup. I don't know if you haven't heard of Canoe, they've sort of had a rough go of it, as most startups do. They did get a contract from NASA to supply the new moon buggy things for the astronauts to drive from the building to the rocket. So it's not like on the moon, it's just like at Florida. But they've had some issues raising funds and getting to production, but apparently they think they have enough money to actually reach production now. And so they have secured a factory. They already have a battery factory that's 150 miles away, which seems far to me because I don't know what miles mean, but I guess it's close enough. But yeah, so Canoe is doing things. So there's some optimism there because they have a weird, funky little minivan thing that they're building that's super flexible and kind of neat. So I hope they make it. GM has teased the GMC Sierra pickup truck, electric, the EV one. So this is the sister to the Silverado, made on the Altium platform as well. So it's the same platform, different looking truck. So this is yet another pickup truck, which is great because those are the most common vehicles sold in North America. This is their second EV truck after the Hummer EV and the Silverado, of course. It's going to have a 643 kilometer range. And it's being positioned to outcompete the F-150 Lightning on every front, including an 800-volt battery pack, apparently. GM actually sold 20,000 EVs in the first quarter of this year, so they've overtaken Ford already in EV production, and they are only behind Tesla right now. So that's kind of neat. The launch trim is going to be $107,000, so right up there with the F-150s, but they're going to have other trims, apparently, going down to 50,000. So we'll believe that when we see it, but they're starting behind the market as apologies, but eventually
I'll have to compete on.
they'll have to compete. So those are the three trims that you see there in the picture. The one on the far right is the launch edition. It looks cool. The other ones are lower trims. They have a few different trims, and you can go on their website and check out the prices if you want. Those are American dollars, so add more for Loomies. Speaking of the other pickup truck, Ram 1500 Rev is what they're branding it as. I don't know if I like that, but whatever. It's there. It features a 229 kilowatt hour battery. So you thought the Ford F-150 had a big ass battery. Ram's got you covered for an 800 kilometer range. So next time someone's like, I can't buy an EV truck because it doesn't tow very far. Well, even if you cut that range in half, that's 4 hours of driving with a big ass trailer. So I think you'll be good. Truck will arrive in 2025, so just 2 years from now. A maximum payload of 2,700 pounds and a towing capacity of 14,000 pounds. 800-volt charging as well, so it'll do 350 kilowatts on a fast charger, just like my Ioniq 5. And it'll also be available in a smaller battery pack for those who are more modest in their truck needs of 168 kilowatt hours. Yeah, for 583 kilometers, which is very respectable. So if you're not towing horses or your yacht, then you could probably do with a smaller battery pack, which will also take less time to charge on road trips. So yeah, 229 kilowatt hours, even at 800 volts and 350 kilowatts, is going to take a while. It's good. He's a thirsty boy. All right. BrightDrop has entered serial production. Like, I've known this because of my work, but now it's public, so I can talk about it a little bit. So the first 500 vehicles have been delivered. The Zevo 600s, pictured in the picture. These, I guess, are replacing the chip truck type vehicles, right? Those what are they called? Step vans. Yeah. So these are being made in the Cami assembly plant in Ontario. They've been
Ontario, California,
Canada.
Canada.
Okay.
There is Ontario, California.
That's true, and there's also Ontario, New York, I learned, which is just on the other side of the water from Toronto, apparently. But anyway, Ontario, Canada. These are made in Canada. BrightDrop has been importing a metric butt ton of batteries for these trucks from the US, and then they assemble the trucks in Canada, and then they ship them. They have a fourth, so Ryder's in the picture because Ryder just ordered 4,000 more trucks, which they don't even expect to get for another 2 years, because that's how much demand there is. There are more than 30 commercial customers for these vans. They expect to reach 50,000 units per year in 2 years. And so these things are being shipped. They will be on the roads, and you will see them very soon, because basically everybody who needs a van has ordered these things. Canada Post. Think about it. Just saying. Also, US Postal Service. Get rid of that ugly, whatever the hell that thing is, and get this instead. Come on. Anyway. World EV sales, as reported by Clean Technica, have now reached 10%. So Canada is right in line with the planet. So we are also at 10% sales for EVs. So they've reported registrations are up 49% year over year, which is cool. So that brings us up to 9.7%, basically 10, in the automotive market. 70% of those vehicles were fully electric, with the balance being plug-in hybrids, of course. Best-selling vehicle was the Tesla Model Y, followed by the BYD Song, which is only sold in like some markets, mostly China. So hopefully that BYD comes to Canada, because those cars are awesome and they're cheap, and they use lithium iron phosphate. So they will be a hit. I think China is just struggling to meet demand because their cars are kind of good. And then, yeah, second.
It's also safety. I mean,
Yeah, they'll have to homologate, of course, but I mean, they'll get there. They're already delivering in Europe, and Europe has similar safety to us, so they'll get there.
Yeah.
Model 3 is the third place. So Tesla, BYD, Model 3, BYD. So there you go. That's kind of neat. 10% for the world. We're getting there. And okay. So because we talk to the public a lot, and the public is on the internet, apparently somebody let them on there, we should be all aware of new FUD that has been detected by the people in the clean tech industry. And the FUD comes from the Daily Mail in the US and the UK, but also now Business Insider and MSN are also doing their journalism thing, where they don't cite initial sources. They just repeat what news outlets have said. And so the news just sort of builds its own thing. That's how we got Y2K, by the way. They are reporting that garages will collapse under the weight of EVs because EVs are heavier, which is actually false. That's not true. That won't happen. But this is what's being reported, so just be aware of it. You can make the underlying assumption, if you want to break it down, is basically that a lot of parking garages were built in the 70s. And if they're not maintained for 40 years or 50 years now, half a century, then a heavy vehicle might make it fall down. But in the real world, buildings have maintenance and standards that they have to meet in order to be a public facility. So, yeah.
Cars in the 70s.
And also, yes, that's another good point. Cars in the 70s were actually very heavy because they were made out of like pig iron and lead, apparently. And the gasoline had lead in it, although that didn't actually add to the weight. That just made you dumber. And so, yeah, EVs are actually not that much heavier than cars from the 70s. So this argument is completely nonsense, but just be aware that it's out there and you might encounter it on Facebook or Reddit or whatever. And just have that in your back pocket. Like, yeah, no, that's dumb. Parking garages are built for like trucks to be in. So whatever, it's not going to be a big deal. Toyota is in the news. Akito Toyota, oh no, Koji Sato, the new CEO of Toyota, not Akito Toyota, he's gone. He has revealed his vision for the company. They are going to do 10 EVs by 2026, and they want to have 1.5 million sales in 3 years. So they're going from basically none to 1.5 million. I wish them luck in 3 years, but I mean, maybe they can pull it off. Who knows?
Did they just sign the deal with BYD this week?
Yes,
They might, yeah, they probably did, but usually for China only for those.
Yeah, what are the cars they sell in China is maybe like BYD?
Yeah. Yeah, those are usually China only cars. So
Yeah, I just saw
Yeah.
the news of BYD Toyota.
yeah, well, this is for global markets. So they want to have 10 new EV models by 2026. So that's encouraging. Some of those models are actually in that picture. But you know, they haven't released them yet. They also want to increase the driving range of their plug-in hybrids to over 200 kilometers, which is a very fascinating proposition. Because then that means that like
You're almost all the way there.
you're almost all the way there. So it's like, okay, this leads me to like, it makes my brain hurt because like, okay, so you almost a full EV, but you still have to lug around a gas motor for no reason and deal with all the nonsense. But it's like you have 200 kilometers, which is good enough for most people most of the time. So it's like really, we'll see. We'll see. Who knows? Anyways, it's something. It's better than what they were doing before, which was nothing. So hopefully they'll survive. VW has revealed the ID.7. So there's another Volkswagen coming to Canada next year with the Buzz. So this will be made in Emden, Germany. It is not cheap. It has 2 battery packs, 77 kilowatt hours or 86 kilowatt hours, depending on how much money you want to spend. Charge rates are a little disappointing at 170 kilowatts. That's a limitation of the MEB platform. And the long range version, the one with the bigger battery, is expected to have 700 kilometers of range. So that'll be cool. The smaller battery one will get 615. So this is very much in line with Ioniq 6. I don't think the pricing will be Ioniq 6 territory. It might be higher based on what their market, it's going to be their luxury sedan. They're going to position it as like a high market vehicle. So you can expect this to cost more than like a Hyundai, unfortunately. And they have to ship it from Germany. So, but anyway, it's a car. It's cool. Adding it to the list. It's already on the buyer's guide, by the way. So go check it out. California, speaking of California earlier, they have already hit their EV targets for 2025, like this year already, they're done. They've sold 1.5 million EVs, 2 years ahead of schedule. That target was set in 2012 when basically only the Leaf and the Model S were available. They thought their 2025 target was insane back in 2012. They thought it was like, it's an order of magnitude change, right? So they were like, we're never going to meet this, but it's an aspirational goal. Well, you know, they met it 2 years early. And if you look at that chart, like I'm no math magician, but that looks awfully exponential to me. Can't be exponential. That looks like the bottom part of an adoption curve, maybe even. So just saying, not linear growth. It's not a line, it's a curve. So current market share, EV market share in California is currently at 21%. 1 year ago, 2022, it was 5.6%. Things change quickly. Tesla, we're into the Tesla corner. Tesla is launching or has launched the Model Y rear-wheel drive. I guess they relaunched it because they had it at the beginning. Now it's back. And the reason it's back is so they get the rebate, or somebody on the Facebook commented and said it wasn't a rebate, it was something else. But anyway, it doesn't matter. We're going to call it a rebate. So it's the rear-wheel drive model. It has a smaller battery for 394 kilometer range, which is respectable. It's fine. And it's $59,990, so a hair under $10 under 60. But you know, whatever. What's kind of neat is that if you convert that into greenbacks, it's 44,300, which is less expensive than the least expensive Y you can buy in the US. So government policies make prices do things, although it is a different model.
I saw something today that these are gonna be made in China.
There's rumors. There are rumors that they're gonna be made in Shanghai with LFPs and shipped over. The bigger battery cell, the 2160 or whatever they are. It's a rumor. Who knows? I didn't report on it because it's a rumor. But these cars are on Tesla's website. Go check them out and pull the trigger on one if you want. And you get $5,000 from the government. Cybertruck, according to Elon. Now Elon has a bit of a reputation for making time not matter. He is saying that they will have a Cybertruck delivery event in Q3 of this year. So I think it might be the carrot in front of the donkey's nose to keep it walking forward on the delivery. Have hope still for your Cybertruck. But I mean, you can expect that those deliveries will be only for Texans in Texas near Austin. And
That work for Tesla.
That work for Tesla. And that 2024 is when the real production is probably going to start, assuming they even make this. We'll see. Don't hold your breath, but there's like a more hope than there was last year. So I think that is it for the news. Back to Raymond.
So next section, I guess, is past and future events. So we've had the Columbus Coffee at the Millennium House over the month of April. There were a few days we didn't do it because we were doing something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
A little one more, the 29th.
there's one more actually, yeah. So it's last weekend that we didn't do it because we're doing stuff in all sorts of places.
Do you hang out down by the Chargers in the parking lot, or do you go up to
We
the?
go up.
We go up for
You
coffee.
know, then we usually go down about a 11:30, 11:45 to 12. And then, look at the cars and all that, so,
It's nice heated garage, it's free parking,
yeah.
free charging, there's 4 stalls for charging.
Yeah. And now,
I can bring my ghetto sled leaf and make it home.
and now that I met got a lyric, so those of you who don't know.
Yeah, so Ahmed, if you're gonna watch this, bring your lyric, I wanna see.
So Ahmed traded in his F-150 Lightning for a lyric, so. And then someone took a picture of it and posted it on Facebook, and he said, yeah, that's mine. They're just starting to show up now.
There's actually 6 in town.
Yeah, there's
There's
Ryan
6.
Yeah,
Ryan just posted a picture on Facebook.
There was 1 7 around yesterday.
yeah,
I haven't seen a lyric yet.
that's a cool, so there was one at the show in Gatineau,
Oh.
and it's a very nice vehicle, very nice vehicle. So anyway, so we had 3 well, actually, we're gonna have one more in April, so if you're interested this weekend, we'd certainly be happy to see as many people as want to show up there. There's lots of space actually.
Tons of space.
So it's a great venue.
And delicious pastries.
Delicious pastries, great coffee and great company, right?
Always great fun.
So if we look at the past events, so I guess the biggest one we had was the show in Gatineau, March 31st, April 2nd, and again, thank you to people who helped out with the show. So we had actually Ryan's car was Ryan's car that show, right? And losing track.
You see it's right there in the picture.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't have my glasses, but I'm not that close enough to the, yeah, it is the ID4. So lots of questions, lots of really good interactions with the public, and so very happy about the show. We would have liked to have more people attend, but we've been looking at some of the numbers. The people from Toyota, okay? Remember, Toyota doesn't have very much to offer at this point. They reported that they got 79 reservations for vehicles at the show, okay? And we know that the other vendors several of them told us that they were happy with how it went. So we had about 8,500 people show up. But it looks like the target audience was really people who were interested in making purchasing decisions. So the dealers were able to sell lots of vehicles, which is fantastic because the more EVs we have, the better it is, right? Okay, so another thing that I went to and Mitchell went to There was on the April 20th, in the morning, so I would have invited some other people to show up, but it was during a day thing. IKEA invited us to go to the launch of the Bolt. This is the Bolt delivery service. I don't remember exactly how they call themselves. It's on the side of the truck there, but those are Leon trucks that they purchased and they placed throughout the country. So I think there's 25 locations across the country or something like this. They're gonna have these trucks. They have 2 here in Ottawa. And there's 4 charging stations, but there's 2 trucks right now, and they're using them to do delivery of IKEA stuff,
Yeah.
right? So,
Capacity for 8 stalls and 8 trucks.
yes, yeah, so, but
They
they,
never expand.
yeah, so they've got all the conduit and all that in place for 4 more chargers, so. So very interesting to see that, and like I say, there many locations, if not all IKEA locations across Canada will have this, if they don't have it already, so very interesting news. It's interesting in many ways, it's really one of the first heavy duty trucks we're seeing, it's not the big, it's not class 8, right, it's class 6, I think. But anyways, it's an indication of what's possible, right? Okay,
It's a class D.
class B, okay. So, other past events, actually didn't have any pictures of the Kentville show, for some reason. So maybe it's because I was too busy talking to people, but, so
Oh, I took a video.
you took video?
Thanks.
No, well, you had the
I had the
drone,
drone.
yeah.
Yeah. Video.
So in Kentville, I was quite happy with the results there. There were lots of cars that were brought by other people. We had quite a few cars. A few inside, but did we have a few inside?
Yep.
We had a few inside, yeah, we had maybe 4.
We had a full lineup outside.
We had a whole bunch outside, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Name it, we had it from
Yeah.
the Mach-E, the Lightning,
Yeah.
the Ionic, the ID4. Oh my God, the Teslas, the 2 Teslas. The new Model S with the weird steering that nobody
Yeah,
got.
it was weird, yeah.
Man, name it, we had the E-Golf part, your Model Y was there too.
Yeah. Lots of interesting cars, so a good variety of cars too, which is
Bolt.
always great
Yeah.
to see, right? And so you talked about there was an F-150 Lightning and a Mach-E that were essentially the dealer, for some reason, thought that we were supposed to be taking care of the car, so that's what ended up happening, but I wasn't aware that we're supposed to manage.
Did you get one for the test drives?
Yeah, so they did do test drives and all that, so, which is great, but what's nice about that is that something similar happened last weekend. Where some lady came to the show and there was a Lightning and a Mach-E there, the GT version, $92,000, but anyways. And someone said, is Mike around? Is Mike around? He said, yeah, I'm Mike. And she said, here are the keys.
Yeah.
They gave me the keys for the 2 cars and just took off.
Yeah.
So, so I don't.
I have a very trusting face.
Well, it might be too that dealers have been talking to each other and.
I also have a very common name, so she could have been looking for a completely different mic.
No, she was looking for you for sure.
She's got really good insurance anyways, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, she was looking for you for sure, actually.
Yeah, no, she said my last name.
Yeah, one thing that was funny is that I ran into the organizer of the show this morning at Campbell Ford. And he was looking for someone at Campbell Ford to bring the cars back because we're still there. But anyways, all that to say that we had another event, April 22nd, with the Living Well show. But you know, not a usually well-attended show. We did have some really good conversations with people like we usually do. One thing to note is that we had this, for those who are online and for the recording. We did have, so they published this Living Well,
Closer,
hey, closer?
closer.
Closer.
There, oh.
So
there,
this
perfect.
Living Well magazine, and you can see there at the bottom, it says something about electric vehicle during a blackout. It's a nice full page story written by Mike that talks about his experience during the Toronto.
20, it's page 20.
20, okay.
Okay, sorry.
So he talks about his experience during the Dura show, and this magazine is being printed. So here's what the thing looks like. And so down. So anyways, very nice article, talks about, you know, it's very timely because we had this power failure a couple of weeks ago. And we've been talking to so many people. I talk to people all the time about how great these cars are when there's no power, right? Because a lot of people are asking me, what happens if there's a garage show or something? What are you gonna do? Where are you gonna charge your car? So I explain these stories, and it's great news.
So there was an article actually I saw, it was about Florida, so I didn't put it in the news today, but Florida had, like South Florida was flooded over the past week, right? They had a rain bomb apparently, which is now a thing. So 70% of gas stations had run out of fuel in like half of that peninsula. So people couldn't get gas, but the EV drivers, like some EV drivers that were interviewed, didn't even realize there was an issue with the gas supply. Because what had happened is the port that brought in all the gasoline had to shut down because of the flooding. And so there was no gas coming into Florida. And so when the stations ran out, they ran out even if they weren't inundated with water. And so 70% of the stations were screwed.
Yeah.
And
So,
and all the EV owners were just buying their charge at home and good to go.
And I'm sure everybody knows that gas stations require power to be able to pump gas, right? So when there was a garage in particular, I remember I was pulling a trailer with branches from my branch that fell in my backyard and passing by garage, service stations where there were huge lineups of people who were hoping to get gas when they would get to the pump, right? But I was just driving by, no problem at all. So, so Living Well Show was that was at the UI Center. The other thing we did on Saturday, we went to Earth Fest in Carlton Place, and that was a fun little event. So one of the pictures I show there, the top right-hand corner, that's the cars we had. So Sam lent us his car for we had a static display there, no test drives. But the van you see in the middle there, that's an e-transit, so a fully electric van. And inside that van, there's a dentist chair and all the equipment to do dental work. So it's a mobile dental clinic. So it's pretty cool because you could use the car, the battery to power all the equipment, right? So it's I would have never thought of something like this, but it was interesting. And the lady who had it brought it to the fair. So so a lot of interesting interesting discussions there too. So fun event. So if we're looking at upcoming events, of course, there's the next monthly meeting in May 29th. Kilowatts and Coffee. So Mike has done. There's a few events that are already planned for June. I didn't put them on there.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But in May 6th, so we're starting now. We're going back in the outside in the wild, as I say there. The weather will be nicer, so it won't be an issue to be outside, and we won't be freezing and all that. So
So May 6th is a new place. It's in Alta Vista because I will only have my leaf still at that point. I can't get to the other ones. So I made it close to my house on purpose, but it has a nice big parking lot in the back, and the Three Sisters Cafe is actually pretty sweet.
cool. Okay, so Cafe Latte Chino we've done before, right? And the same with an Avia Cakery, right? So so they're good location. So the next other event that's coming. So right now we are looking for in our center to book some events for May. And we still haven't had confirmation of events for May. So so we are expecting mid-May. There might be an event, but again, I'm not sure yet.
Do they know May's next week?
Anyways,
Maybe a reminder.
anyways, yeah, so in June, I've actually had a request to do another thing around this time in Beacon Hill. From a friend of mine, and it might be a good event to drive participation at this event, because this one will be doing some test drives. So if you look at the spreadsheet and you're wanting to volunteer, please sign up. So we'll be doing test drives from 4 to 7 p.m. on Friday. Saturday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Why 11 a.m.? If you're there earlier, we could do some earlier, but there's a parade from 10 to 11. I'll have my car and the trailer, or someone wants to have another car. We could use another car and the trailer in the parade. And then Sunday from 10 to 3. So we learned some lessons from last year with this event, right? Last year, remember Saturday nights, it got really slow. So we're not going past 5, and actually if things are slow by 4, we could take off at 4, right? There is a band this year also. It
It's
is
not
not,
ABBA.
it is not,
Fantastic.
it's a rock group. I don't know what they sing, but you're more than welcome to, there's a fee for that show, but you're more than welcome to participate in that. There'll be I would assume like last year, there was a beer tent and all that, and last year, my wife and I went to see the ABBA show, which was fantastic.
Said no one ever.
For those that like ABBA, right? So that's in June, early June. So again, we're waiting to confirm events for the rest of this summer with our friends at Envar Center. We do have a number of things lined up, but they need to actually book them and confirm them. And again, I think I mentioned earlier that, we're doing this show at the EY Center, October 26th to 29th. I've been spending a lot of time with a promoter to organize this, going around to talk to various dealers to gauge interest and all that. Lots of interesting things are happening with this, so we're gonna know by next week, we know if we're doing it or not. Because the promoter is, he wants to sign up enough dealers to be able to recover his money, because for him, he's gonna be spending several $100,000 to put the show in place, right? So he needs to have assurance that he'll be able to get his money back and hopefully make a good profit too. So it's a promoter that did the Gatineau show. He's the one who's been doing CCSNAs for about 8 years now. So please mark it on your calendar. So the EVCO will be helping us with the test drives for that event, because we're hoping to do massive amounts of test drives. So in Montreal, they had an EV show this last weekend. They did 1,500 test drives in one weekend. So I don't think we'll do that many, but we should be able to do hundreds and hundreds. So we'll see how that goes. Reminder, I thought I'd take that out. Okay, so reminder, we have a YouTube channel. In the YouTube channel, we actually publish the recordings of our meetings. So the recording for the last meeting is actually up there. I forgot to put the link in our presentations on our website. I'll do that over the next couple of days. But please subscribe if you haven't already. Subscriptions help us to get eyes onto our content. So that's it. Any questions?
One quick one, Raymond, any talk about the Ottawa Car Show coming back?
So I talked to the promoter of the car show some months, I can't remember exactly when I talked to him last, but he had told me at that time that it was canceling for this year. Normally it's at end of February, early March, and he's canceled for this year. The problem he's having, and this is illustrated by what happened in Montreal. So Montreal had an EV show last weekend. They had a car show, regular car show, about a month before. The regular car show, there's a bunch of major manufacturers that didn't show up, okay? Because the major manufacturers don't want to spend money on car shows in general, but specifically on marketing gas products. So I've spoken to a lot of dealers, and several have told me that, if you want to do something with gas cars, there's no money. Want to do something with electric cars, there's tons of money. Interesting, right? So that's a very good. It's a very good indication of how these people are thinking and all that, right? And it's super good news. But that means that if you look at the show in Montreal, the gas car show didn't do well, and people were saying they were disappointed because some manufacturers weren't there. The EV show, they had over 60 vehicles. They have Lucid there, they have Rivian there. They had from GM, they had a Silverado electric. Okay, it's not out yet. They had one. They had a Equinox electric, which is a wild, yeah. They had a Blazer electric. So the manufacturers have been helpful with these events, right? So we're hoping to be able to the same thing in October. The other thing is, as I've said to some people before, we're going to be working with Electric Mobility Canada, and he's the one actually who's been pushing the promoter to do a show in Ottawa, because he wants to leverage the show to do other things. So there's mutual benefits there. So he wants to do a VIP event with politicians. And he's gonna invite the media, which means if it makes the news, people know there's a car show in Ottawa just by watching the news. So he's also gonna be doing promotion and all that, right? It should be a pretty good event. We're really hoping that it's gonna make a huge difference.
Mhm. Next, yeah. So if you're,
Click or back camera.
so if you're watching live, this is now, you can stick around, we'll do the round table. If you're watching after the fact on YouTube, this is where your video ends. You can follow us on Mastodon, we're at EVCO. You can follow us on TikTok. Ryan made a really good, or not Ryan. Somebody made a really good video. It wasn't Ryan. Richard made a really good video that went viral on TikTok. So look for us there. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next month. And
And anybody has any questions or anything, we're still gonna do.
you have to be quiet so I can cut the